Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video. In today's video, I'm going to be doing another Patreon requested video, and this is my prediction for the David Picasso versus Kyonosuke Kameda fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like video, if you do indeed like video, feel free to join the Patreon. If you request a video early enough, I can do it privately released early on the Patreon. This one's going to go straight onto YouTube, but again, you can request any video. I wasn't going to do a prediction for this one, but it's a good fight. It's on a stacked card, and yeah, I'm here to do another prediction for it. So yeah, let's get straight into it. I appreciate anybody who does join the Patreon. Yeah, so like I say, this being a stacked card, it's the, of course, Pacquiao versus Barrios card, and to be fair, it's quite, I suppose the way to put it is silently stacked, because there's plenty of good fights on this card. I mean, there's Zu Fundora, there's Joet Gonzalez, Brandon Figueroa, there's Mark Magsayo coming back, there's, of course, David Picasso against Kameda here, which is, I think, going to be a firefight. There's multiple different really good fights, really good matchups on this card. So, again, like I say, I think it is silently, kind of to an extent, stacked. And for Picasso, coming into this fight, you would have to probably argue that this is maybe one of the tougher fights in his career. He's not had a tremendous amount of tests so far in his career, and you should probably think that perhaps he should be fighting at a higher level at this point. But I still think he is, developing to an extent. I think there is perhaps a certain limit in which he should look at before he actually starts progressing properly, because you can wait around a bit too long and then get a bit lazy and get these kind of bad habits and bad tendencies in your fighting skills, and that's just because you're fighting a lower level than what you should be just for a bit too long, and that improvement stages just start, you start being able to get away with making a few mistakes and things like that. And I think that's what he showcased perhaps a little bit in that last fight against Coelho, who, yes, he was able to stop and it was a good stoppage, but Coelho was coming in on short notice and isn't a tremendously well skilled fighter. And I could see a few tendencies, creeping in that were perhaps not really what you want to see compared to a performance of his like Hovhannissian, which was on the Gotti 3 Mayweather undercard, which was a much higher kind of skill level from what I've seen from him in the past, and he was looking good, and that was against a good level of opposition against Hovhannissian. And so, like I say, you gotta be continually up in the levels, in my opinion, and I think this is maybe not a tremendous upgrade, but it is a decent level of opposition. And he spent a lot of his career so far kind of ticking away on the lower kind of background sides of cards, realistically. I mean, he was on the Munguia Race undercard last time. Again, like I say, the Mayweather versus Gotti undercard. He's been ticking away. I think he was on the Canelo undercard a little while ago, and so like I say, he's been slowly kind of going away in the background. I mean, I've got no idea who he's signed with, if he is signed with anybody, just because he is, on. He's on top rank cards, he's on PBC cards, he's been, going on these exhibition event cards. Again, like I say, I'm not entirely sure who he is signed with, but in general, he is at least still being active, and I guess to an extent that is a good thing. And he had quite a few fights last year. I think he had 5 fights last year, which is a pretty impressive feat for any fighter to have. And it's interesting to see that he's taken this long. It's taken all the way to July to see him back in the ring again for this year, but he's still only 24, and it is the case where yes, he may be still developing, and that's what maybe his management team are kind of seeing and his coaches are seeing, and maybe that's why they're taking a bit longer with him. But at the same time, if he does get a step up and loses, he might learn a bit more, and he might, he will still have time to come back and rebuild, as like I say, he's only 24. He's being very much waiting for the opportunity, and the opportunity is obvious what he's waiting for. He is WBC ranked number 1 in the super bantamweight division, and his name has been mentioned by His Excellency to, of course, fight Naoya Inoue. And so it's obvious that he's waiting for that, and I feel like the WBC have said to him he needs to get a fight here against Kameda to happen, or at the same time maybe he's been talked about being on the Mexico versus Japan card in December 27th, from what I believe. So, like I say, he can't realistically have 5 fights in 2024, then have nothing until December. He should have that fight in the middle, and if that is what is being targeted, then that's seemingly why this fight is being made. And it's an opponent in Kameda who is coming off a TKO loss to Nery, and that was a fight in which he didn't realistically look the best. Nery looked pretty good at featherweight. Obviously, there was the whole fiery build-up, which was quite unexpected in the build-up to the fight. But, for the most part, he was looking good. And I feel like that was a really good kind of step-up performance from his loss for Nery into the featherweight division. But for Kameda, he's dropping back down in weight. And, I suppose because they have the mutual opponent in Nery, Inoue, and, now Kameda, I suppose, you can make a bit of an argument to say that Picasso and Kameda is a good fight, but again, I'm not entirely sure in that kind of level if it is, on paper a good matchup. But, he's never had a significant win, and he's had his toughest test being Nery. He's had a few losses previous as well. He is part of a fighting family who, have produced 3 world champions and are a great fighting family, arguably one of the best in the whole of Japan in, Koki, Daiki and Tomoki. They are, the Kameda brothers, and if you don't know them, Koki is, he was a former, and Daiki are both former lower weight world champions back around, they ended their careers about 2015, and then Tomoki has just fought Angela Liao. Of course, he is a former world champion, or at least WBC interim world champion as well. So, like I say, he's good and part of a good family, and so he's got some good, at least support around him for his career. Like I say, does that really mean a particular much? Not entirely, but like I say, at least it adds a bit of a name factor for any Japanese fans who might be wanting to tune in to this card. To speak about them both individually as fighters, these fighters are, both going to make for a firefight for this fight, I believe. Picasso, as a fighter, he's a come forward fighter who's got solid accuracy and good fundamentals. I think his fundamentals are, pretty solid and pretty well rounded. He goes to the body well and he throws off in combinations. Again, it's a bit of a typical Mexican style, maybe not as physical as what certain Mexican styles could be, but it is, throwing a lot with going to the body, coming forwards, working well in good combinations, maybe a bit more accuracy than certain Mexican fighters do, but, he doubles off his left hand really nicely and well, and I think that's what his kind of best combination is, where he goes to the body and then switches that left to go up into an uppercut. It's a very nice pair of shots in which he throws and he doubles that up nicely. He's got a high output. His hands are relatively high when throwing, so again, that's kind of what I mean when I'm talking about his fundamentals. He'll be wary enough to catch shots if he is throwing, which is something in which I feel like is important against somebody like Kameda who does carry power. He pushes the tempo, and again, that's why I believe it could be a high output type of fight. He's an in-close type of fighter, and he can move relatively well. Again, on the front foot, he's going to be throwing. On the back foot, he's going to be swinging a bit. It's probably going to be a bit less controlled, but he will be letting his hands go, at least when he's on the back foot. Sometimes he can cover up, but I believe when he gets more into a war and he gets more into the fight, he will be swinging on the back foot. Negatives about him, I think when he's throwing on the back foot, again, like I say, it's quite swingy and it's not really controlled that much. So I don't think he throws, controlled, well-timed counters at all. His physicality, like I've talked about, isn't, the strongest, isn't the best, especially for his size. I don't think he uses his actual physical attributes that well in the range and the size that he does hold. He is quite a raw talent from what it seems. There's definitely a few things that do seem like they need to be patched up to make them really amazing. I'm not looking at him and going, wow, he's a real, standout fighter who's really going to cause some like Inoue a lot of problems at the moment. Of course, he could, surprise me with a Kameda performance here and really, stake a claim, but like I say, he still looks like quite a raw talent. His hand speed can be good, but it didn't look the best against Coella. His reactions didn't look the best either, and he doesn't really twist his punches that well when he goes to throw, especially straights. He doesn't utilize his range, like I've talked about. He's got quite a weak guard. He can be tensing up when he's getting hit, which again isn't always the best of things. He doesn't really set up a tremendous amount of his work, and he, like I've touched upon, he may not be improving because he's just spending too long on these easier fights, and he can be walked down. Will Kameda be able to do that? I'm not entirely sure, because Kameda got walked down against Nery, but that was a fueled up Nery who was fighting very aggressively in the featherweight division. Again, coming down in weight, Kameda with the power might be able to walk down Picasso a little bit. Kameda more so as a fighter, he throws big on the back foot, and when he does throw big on the back foot, it's quite a imposing pair of shots in which he'll often throw. He'll throw a bit of a sliding left hook, which can, chop down anything in close proximity, and then he'll push through a good straight hand. And, a lot of his shots are kind of forcing through a guard. At times he can sneak a little uppercut through the guard, but for the most part, he's going to be forcing his shots through the guard. And, at times it can land with power and can have success. He'll definitely want a war, and I think Picasso has kind of signed up for that, but at the same time, I don't think that is perhaps the smartest thing to just get in an all-out war with Kameda. He moves his head a bit and tries to slip. It's all right. It's nothing crazy. Perhaps a little bit more head movement than that of Picasso. He will fight and can match the opponent's tempo well. He's always a threat, Kameda, and he definitely has heart. He showcased that against Nery. He got caught with multiple big shots, and he was there, inviting him on. They were talking to each other during the fight, and it definitely was an entertaining contest. And like I said, I do feel like it did showcase that Kameda has heart, and again, that is something in which we haven't seen a tremendous amount from on Picasso's side just yet. Negatives about him, I think he can, sit on the ropes. He tries to slip a bit on the ropes and things like that, but he was getting caught by just sitting on the ropes a bit too long against Nery. He will stand and trade. He's, of course, been hurt, but he wasn't knocked out. He managed to get back to his feet, but he was definitely beaten down against Nery, which, showcases, of course, some weakness there. But I just don't believe that Picasso has that level of power, even though he is coming off a stoppage of his own right. He finds range not the best, and he can kind of stumble when he is throwing his rangy shots a bit, and it can be like he's lunging in. He can be moved around with punches, but again, I'm not entirely sure if Picasso is good enough at doing that. He's got quite a wary jab. Again, like I say, when he's fighting at mid-range, it's not the best, but I wouldn't, again, say that Picasso is the best at mid-range either. He can be sometimes coming with singular shots which aren't the best, and his accuracy when trading is quite poor. I feel like that's where Picasso might be able to thrive a bit more, and he does headhunt a lot more than that of Picasso. Who do I think is going to win? I do think David Picasso is going to be able to win via unanimous decision. I think there could be definitely rounds, especially later on or at times, where Picasso gets caught with shots, and yes, he has a high guard, but it is a weak guard, like I've touched upon, so he could definitely get caught with that, sliding shot to then be mixed in with the straight right, and that could cause problems even if he is backing up Kameda, where, like I say, he could even get dropped by a bit of a flash knockdown. It wouldn't surprise me, but again, for the most part, I think his accuracy is going to be better. I think Kameda might be a bit more wary because he got beaten down so badly against Nery, so he probably will be more willing to go onto the back foot, and then Picasso will be able to go down to the body better and outwork him in that way. He will just have to be very much wary of what Kameda does throw back, which, like I say, could cause it to go into a bit of a war, but not an all-out firefight. I don't think it will go into straight that, but I do think it will still be entertaining. Who we can go on to fight next? I mean, of course, it's touched upon, like I say, that December 27th Mexico versus Japan card. If that doesn't happen, I mean, if Inoue loses to Akhmadaliev, or if, Inoue just doesn't really want to fight Picasso and he wants to do something else, I think what would make sense for the super bantamweight division is Inoue to fight Akhmadaliev, then invite up Nakatani to then fight him. So I think David Picasso should fight. He could either go down the route of fighting former Inoue opponents like a Tapales or a Cardenas. They're both still, very well skilled fighters who could give him a tough test. Or Casemiro, of course, is a WBO former bantamweight champion and has moved up and, still hasn't been given an opportunity to fight for a world title, even though he's still in a highly ranked position and arguably does deserve a shot, saying he was a world champion down in the lower weight division. So, Picasso versus Casemiro could be the perfect final eliminator, in my opinion, for then, Inoue if he does beat Nakatani. And, that makes sense to me. I think for Inoue's career, he wouldn't realistically gain much from fighting Picasso at this point in his career, but if Picasso was to go on to beat someone like a Casemiro, his stock would go up Picasso's, and then it would make more sense for him to go on to fight someone like an Inoue. But, that's just my opinion. Let me know if your opinion in the comments below, and hope you did enjoy. Like the video. If you did, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.